Hi, I'm Abigail, and if you'd told me 2 years ago that I'd be starting over at 43, jobless, divorced, and completely lost, I would have laughed. And then probably cried. I thought I had it all, the house, the career, the picture-perfect marriage. But the truth? I was disappearing behind someone else's dream. It took losing everything to find myself again. So now I have to ask, what about you? Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered who you've become? Or worse, who you left behind? Because sometimes, the end of everything is really just the start of something real. I still remember the exact moment everything shattered, not when I lost my job, not even when I packed my things into a box and walked out of that glass office building for the last time. No, it was the look in Charles's eyes when I told him. That was the moment. 15 years I gave to that accounting firm. I climbed the ladder, worked late nights, missed vacations, all because I believed hard work meant security. But downsizing doesn't care about dedication. They handed me a severance check and a polite "thank you for your service." I was stunned, but I told myself I'd figure it out. I always did. I waited until that evening to tell Charles. I even brewed his favorite coffee, the expensive dark roast he insisted on, and waited in our designer kitchen, our so-called dream home. When I told him, his eyes changed. "You what?" he said, quiet and sharp. I repeated it, voice shaky. "The firm is downsizing. They're letting go of senior staff. I offered to take a pay cut, Charles." His hand froze mid-sip, and then the mug slammed onto the granite counter, coffee splashing onto the surface I used to lovingly polish. "A pay cut? That's your solution?" His voice rose, not in volume but in pressure. "Jesus, Abigail, you're 43. You should be at the peak of your career, not begging to stay relevant." I stood there stunned. Not because he was upset, we'd been walking on thin ice for years, but because of what came next. "You don't serve any purpose to me anymore." Just like that, like I was a broken appliance, outdated, no longer useful. 23 years of marriage, erased with one sentence. I gripped the edge of that cold, polished counter, trying to steady myself. I reminded him, I pleaded, that we built this life together. I helped put him through business school. I ran our home, managed his dinners, charmed his clients. "You just kept the lights on," he said, "and now you can't even do that." He straightened his tie, the one I bought him for Christmas, and picked up his briefcase. "I want you out by the end of the week." And just like that, he walked out, leaving behind nothing but silence and that damn coffee stain drying on the counter. I stood in his kitchen, surrounded by reminders of a life I thought was ours. Family photos on the wall, that granite countertop he had to have, every piece of furniture, every square inch of that house, designed to his taste. His version of success. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister. How did he take it? How could I even begin to explain that I'd just been downgraded from partner to dead weight? That my worth, in his eyes, had always been tied to what I could do for him, not who I was. That was the moment, not the job loss, not the slammed mug. The realization that somewhere along the line I had lost myself trying to keep someone else's world together. After Charles walked out, everything felt too still. The silence in that house was heavy, not peaceful, but hollow. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the space he'd just vacated, the door still swaying slightly from his exit. That was the house we designed together, or at least I thought we had. But looking around, I realized there wasn't a single thing that felt like me. The granite countertops? His idea. The Sub-Zero fridge? His. Even the paint color on the walls, some designer beige he insisted was timeless. I wandered from room to room, feeling like a guest in a museum of a life that had never really been mine. Our bedroom felt like the coldest place of all. I opened the closet, staring at my clothes lined up exactly how he liked them, sorted by color, sleeve length, and season. I used to think that made me organized. Now I saw it for what it was, controlled. I reached out and touched the silk blouse I wore on our last anniversary dinner. I dressed up, put on makeup, tried to spark some version of the woman he used to adore. He hadn't even looked up from his phone. Grief doesn't always hit in waves. Sometimes it's quiet, like dust settling in sunlight. That's how it felt when I sat on the edge of the bed, 2 suitcases beside me, and realized I had nowhere to go. I wasn't just leaving a house, I was leaving a role I'd played for over 2 decades. My phone buzzed again. My sister, Brooklyn. "Abigail, you're scaring me. Call me." She had no idea how right she was. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I dialed her number. When she answered, all I said was, "I need a place to stay." She didn't hesitate. "Your room is already ready." I packed slowly, hands trembling at first, but growing steadier with each item I folded. Every pair of pants, every blouse, every pair of heels was a symbol of who I had been, someone who performed her role to perfection but forgot her own lines. By the time I zipped the suitcase, something inside me had shifted. Not healed, not even hopeful, just clear. I couldn't stay here and keep pretending. I needed to leave, to start something, even if I didn't know what yet. As I carried the suitcase down the hallway, I passed the framed photo of us in Cancun, 15th anniversary, smiling in the sun. I'd kept it up out of habit. Now, I saw the truth in that photo. I was smiling, yes. But his arm around me was stiff, posed. It wasn't love in that picture. It was performance. I closed the front door quietly behind me, not wanting to give him the satisfaction of a slam. I wasn't leaving in rage. I was leaving with resolve. And what came next would be nothing like the life I left behind. Brooklyn's house wasn't big. It wasn't fancy. There were no marble countertops or imported tiles, just creaky floorboards, mismatched furniture, and the comforting smell of coffee, paint, and something floral she always wore. And yet, the moment I stepped inside, I could breathe for the first time in years. She wrapped me in a hug that said, "Welcome home," not what happened. No interrogation, no judgment, just presence. "You look like you could use this," she said, handing me a mug of chamomile tea. I didn't realize how badly I needed something warm to hold until that moment. That night, as I unpacked into the tiny guest room with the twin bed and floral comforter, I was surrounded by small signs of care, extra towels, a reading lamp, a stack of old books. Brooklyn had made space for me even before I'd asked. "I'm sorry for dropping all of this on you," I said as she joined me, sitting on the edge of the bed. She just shook her head. "Abigail, I've been waiting for this day for years." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She looked at me. Not with pity, but something gentler. "When was the last time you smiled?" she asked. "I don't mean at a dinner party. I mean really smiled, or painted." Painted. That word hit like a memory I hadn't visited in decades. I used to paint, watercolors mostly. I wasn't a professional, never planned to be, but I loved it. The way the brush moved, the quiet that came with it, and I gave it up. Charles said the smell gave him headaches. I whispered, more to myself than to her. So I stopped. Brooklyn nodded slowly. "And after that, what else did you stop doing?" That night, I cried. Not the quiet, controlled tears I was used to. These were guttural, wrenching sobs that felt like they'd been locked away for years, and Brooklyn, bless her heart, didn't try to fix it. She just held me like she had when we were kids and I'd scraped my knees. When the storm passed, she reached under the bed and pulled out a wooden box. My art supplies, brushes, old sketch pads, paint tubes still half full. "You left these here 8 years ago," she said. "Figured they were safer with me." I opened the box and the scent hit me. Paper, paint, dust, memory. It felt like opening a door I'd boarded shut. The next morning, the first thing I did wasn't check emails or call a recruiter. I walked into Brooklyn's garden, mug in one hand, sketch pad in the other. The sun was just rising, dew still clinging to the petals. My hand trembled as I picked up the brush, but I painted. Not to impress, not to perform, but to feel. The lines weren't perfect, the colors bled. But for the first time in years, it was real, and that messy, awkward painting, it felt more like me than anything I'd done in decades. It's strange how life can shift in the span of a single conversation overheard in a coffee shop. I wasn't looking for an opportunity that morning. I was just trying to rewrite my resume, update it with corporate buzzwords to make me sound hireable again. But my heart wasn't in it. I didn't want to go back to that world. I just didn't know what else was possible. That's when I heard her. A woman at the next table, clearly overwhelmed, clutching her phone and speaking in hushed panic. "What do you mean she quit? The exhibition opens in 3 weeks. She listened, then groaned. "These are our biggest donors. If we don't pull this off, we lose them." I tried not to eavesdrop, but something about her tone hit a nerve. That helpless, frantic urgency. I'd felt it too many times during corporate crisis calls. She hung up and dropped her head into her hands, and before I could stop myself, I leaned over. "Sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. Are you looking for someone to manage the event?" She looked up, eyes red and skeptical. Unless you've got gallery management experience and can start yesterday, probably not. I took a breath. No gallery experience, I admitted. But I spent 15 years managing corporate events, donor relations, and six-figure budgets. I've handled worse situations than this with less time. She stared at me, silent for a moment, then slowly stood up and offered her hand. Diana Reeves, director of the Hillcrest Community Arts Center. Abigail Adams, I replied. For the first time, I didn't add Mitchell. That name no longer defined me. She hesitated. Why would someone like you want to work at a small community center? I didn't give her a rehearsed answer. I told her the truth. Because I lost myself in the world I used to live in. I stopped painting. I stopped dreaming. I was good at my job, but it hollowed me out. This feels like a way back to who I used to be. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she said, "Come with me." 10 blocks later, I was standing in a historic Victorian mansion, charming, a little rough around the edges, but filled with potential. "This is Hillcrest," Diana said. "Our annual exhibition is in chaos, lighting's unfinished, artist communication is a mess, and we have no marketing materials. If this fails, we could lose our biggest sponsors." I looked around at the space, the wide walls, the natural light. I could already see how it could be transformed. "When can I start?" I asked. And just like that, something clicked. It didn't matter that I was earning a fraction of my old salary. I wasn't chasing prestige anymore. I was chasing purpose. And I had no idea then that this small, chaotic gallery, this accidental detour, would become the foundation for an entirely new life. One where I wasn't just managing art, I was living it. From day one, the Hillcrest Community Arts Center felt like a different universe. Gone were the tailored suits, the stiff boardrooms, the shallow corporate small talk. In its place, paint-splattered floors, half-installed lighting, and a revolving door of artists, volunteers, and community members who genuinely cared. The chaos was real, but so was the passion. I dove in headfirst. Long days turned into longer nights. I was making phone calls, coordinating with artists, rearranging the gallery layout, and designing marketing materials, all with a budget that wouldn't have covered catering for one of Charles's charity galas. Brooklyn watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and concern. "Are you sure about this?" she asked one night as I sat at her kitchen table surrounded by floor plans and scribbled to-do lists. "I've never been more sure," I said without hesitation, and that was the truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't playing a role or living in someone else's story. This work mattered, not because it was lucrative, but because it was real. That's when I met Edward Cooper. He showed up late one evening, just as I was struggling with a gallery layout that refused to make sense. Leaning on a cane, his eyes were sharp behind thick glasses, and he walked with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen it all. "You're doing it wrong," he said, gesturing toward the sketch in my notebook. "Excuse me." He pointed to one piece on the layout. "That Chapman painting. It needs morning light. By afternoon, the colors die." I blinked. "And you are?" "Edward Cooper. I used to teach here. Back when we had funding, before they cut all the art programs that didn't make money." He studied my sketch, then glanced around the room. "You're new." "Abigail Adams." I extended my hand. "Very new." He didn't smile, but something in his posture softened. "Let me guess. Corporate escapee trying to rediscover herself through nonprofit work?" I laughed. "That obvious? Only to those who've done it too." For the next 2 hours, Edward walked me through the gallery, giving insight into everything from lighting angles to the emotional flow of an exhibition. Things no management textbook had ever taught me. He saw art not just as objects on walls, but as experiences, connections, stories. And I realized I was doing the same. Each decision I made wasn't just logistical, it was personal. It was me reclaiming a voice I didn't know I'd lost. I wasn't just curating an exhibition. I was rebuilding my identity. Not around what Charles valued, not around what the world expected, but around what actually made me feel alive. I didn't know it yet, but Edward would become more than a mentor. He would be the one who helped me see that the same eye I once used to paint the world around me, I could now use to rebuild the world within me. The gallery was finally coming together. Bit by bit, it began to resemble not just a space for art, but a space for belonging. The lighting was in place. The invitations were sent. The walls were filled with work from students, veterans, and local artists, each piece a window into someone's story. And then I saw it, Charles's name. printed neatly on the RSVP list. Charles Mitchell, attending on behalf of his company's charitable foundation. I stared at the list, my hands suddenly clammy. Diana noticed the shift in my face. You okay? I nodded too quickly. Yeah, I just wasn't expecting that name. Your ex? Very ex. He was the last person I wanted to see that night. But maybe, just maybe, it was exactly what I needed. Over the next week, I threw myself into final preparations. I adjusted lighting, edited program notes, and worked with Edward to fine-tune every gallery section. I was focused, but not just on the event, on proving something, not to Charles, to myself. You've got a good eye, Edward told me one afternoon as we repositioned a sculpture. I used to think so, I replied. Then I spent 20 years handing all my decisions over to someone else. You didn't lose it, he said simply. You just stopped trusting it. The night of the exhibition arrived faster than I was ready for. The gallery shimmered under the soft lighting, music played gently in the background. People trickled in. Donors, artists, families, board members. And then he walked in. Charles. Perfectly pressed suit, polished shoes, the same confident posture, but there was something else in his face. Maybe it was surprise, maybe even discomfort. He didn't recognize this version of me. I approached him before he had the chance to corner me. Welcome to Hillcrest, I said professionally. Can I give you a tour? He blinked, clearly thrown off by my calm. Abigail, this is quite the event. Thank you. We've worked hard. I led him into the first gallery space where the walls were lined with powerful portraits, some raw, some joyful, all deeply human. For the next 20 minutes, I walked him through the exhibition the same way I had every other guest. No emotion, no bitterness, just grace. When we finally reached the last room, he paused in front of a familiar painting. Mine, a watercolor of Brooklyn's garden, bold, messy, honest. You painted this? He asked. I did. You've changed. I looked at him, not past him, not through him, at him. No, I said, I've just stopped trying to be someone else. Before he could respond, Diana called my name. She was standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Abigail, come meet Michael Stevens, Regional Arts Council. He's very impressed with what you've done here. Charles watched as I walked toward them, leaving him behind. And in that moment, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was free. Because this exhibition wasn't just about showcasing art. It was about reclaiming the canvas of my life, and I was finally holding the brush. Michael Stevens didn't look like anyone I used to know in the corporate world. No slicked back hair or forced smiles. Just salt and pepper curls, kind eyes, and a quiet presence that made you feel seen. I've heard a lot about this place, he said, shaking my hand, but I wasn't expecting to feel something walking through it. That's the idea, I replied. We don't just showcase art, we share stories. Over the next hour, Michael and I talked about everything: community impact, art programs in underserved areas, even the veteran sculpture initiative Edward had helped organize. He listened, really listened, without trying to correct or control the conversation. It felt strange. It felt good. I nearly forgot Charles was even in the room. As the evening wound down and guests filtered out, I stayed behind to help clean up. Michael lingered too. When he offered to walk me to my car, I expected the usual small talk. Instead, he paused at the gallery door. I'd like to hear more about your ideas for expanding community programs, he said. Then, almost shyly, added, maybe over coffee. The old me would have hesitated, overthinking everything. But the new me, she smiled and said, I'd like that. What followed wasn't a whirlwind romance, it was something gentler, real. Our coffee date turned into dinner. Dinner turned into long walks through parks, conversations about grief and growth, about who we used to be and who we wanted to become. Michael wasn't trying to fill a void. He wasn't trying to rescue me. He just saw me, exactly as I was. And slowly, I let myself be seen. But life, as always, had one more test for me. A few weeks after the exhibition, Diana called me into her office. The Regional Arts Council is offering us a major grant, she said. It would fund our programs for the next 3 years. My heart leapt, until she added, they want you to manage it, full-time, across multiple centers, including working closely with Michael Stevens. I didn't say anything right away. She didn't have to explain the problem. People would talk. They'd assume I got the position because of my connection to him. Just like they'd once assumed I was only successful because of Charles. That night, I sat in Brooklyn's garden painting under the fading light, angry, confused, and tired. Michael found me there. I heard about the offer, he said gently, and if you're worried about how it looks, we can hit pause on this. He meant it. There was no pressure, no guilt, just space for me to choose. And that's when I realized I'd spent years letting other people define me, their stories, their perceptions. Not anymore. The next morning, I walked into Diana's office and accepted the position, on my own terms, with transparency, with integrity. I wasn't running anymore, I was leading. And I finally understood, this wasn't just a new chapter. It was my story now, and I was the one writing it. The news broke on a Tuesday. I was in my office reviewing a new grant proposal when my phone buzzed. Brooklyn's name on the screen. A second later, an email arrived with just a link and one sentence. You need to see this. The headline hit like a punch to the gut. Mitchell Financial under federal investigation for fraud. CEO, assets frozen pending further review. Charles. I stared at the screen as my heart pounded. The article detailed a tangled scheme, promised returns, falsified accounts. Investor money moved where it shouldn't be. For a long time I just sat there, silent, numb. Michael appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me, reading the panic on my face. I need some air, I muttered, and left the building. I ended up in the courtyard behind the center, where Edward was guiding a group of veterans through a mural project. He took one look at me, then quietly sent the group on break. You've seen the news, he said. I nodded. I don't know how to feel. Part of me's shocked. The other part, I sighed. Maybe I'm not shocked at all. I spent the afternoon fielding calls from anxious donors and concerned board members. 3 major contributors were also linked to Mitchell Financial. Diana called an emergency meeting. We're getting pressure, she said. They're questioning your connection to Charles, wondering if we should have known something. I'm not married to him, I said calmly. Haven't been for a long time. But you were, Diana replied, and that's enough for some of them. The next few days were brutal. The whispers, the doubts, the guilt, even though I'd had nothing to do with Charles's business. I hadn't seen his books. I wasn't involved. But I'd stood beside him for years, smiled for the cameras, shaken hands with his clients. Wasn't that complicity in some people's eyes? The old me would have crumbled, would have apologized for things that weren't her fault, would have tried to fix everything quietly, no matter how much it broke her. But that version of me was long gone. So I scheduled one-on-one meetings with each of the concerned donors, not to beg, but to clarify. I told the truth. I shared exactly what I knew, and more importantly, what I didn't. I walked them through the Art Center's finances, our community impact, our plans for growth. I reminded them that their investments weren't tied to one man's scandal, but to real people, real programs, real change, and it worked. All 3 donors renewed their support. One even increased their funding, telling me, if anything, your leadership through this just proved why you're exactly where you belong. But the real reckoning came a week later when I found Charles sitting in Brooklyn's garden, disheveled, defeated, desperate. I need your help, he said. It felt surreal. This man who once told me I was useless now asking me to save him. And for the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the man who broke me, but as a man who had broken himself. And what I told him next would define not just our past, but the future I'd spent so long fighting to reclaim. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild after loss, rediscover who you are, or start again when everything fell apart, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and share where your new beginning started. Let's build a community that celebrates resilience and real transformation. And if you want more powerful stories like this, stories of second chances, growth, and finding purpose, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's so much more to come, and you won't want to miss what's next. This isn't just content, it's connection. Let's grow together.